Hey everyone, welcome to Question Period Rewind. I'm Donna Skelly, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Get ready to travel back in time to 1986, the year when Microsoft went public, the Oprah Winfrey Show was first syndicated, and when Wayne Gretzky was at the top of his game with the Edmonton Oilers, breaking his own NHL record for the most assists and the most points in a season. These are records, by the way, that he still holds to this day. Now, let's take a listen to what the House was talking about.
Oral questions. The member for Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Common courtesy is perhaps the proper terminology for it. The minister is becoming as unctuous as the Attorney General.
Question, please.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Health. Now that we've had an opportunity to review this document, which again is clearly labeled a draft document, and looking at Section 17B of the draft amendments to the Nursing Homes Act, it calls for the appointment by the Minister of a nursing home residence representative who shall report to the Minister. Would the Minister not agree that for an advocate to be truly free and to act on behalf of residents of nursing homes, that advocate must be independent of the Ministry?
Speaker, I think that from my point of view that advocates, those people who have at heart the interest of the residents, can perform in a number of fashions in a number of forums, and I think from my standpoint the particular draft which you're reading from provides one of those options, and I think that we will be considering it in the final form of legislation here in the Legislative Assembly, and for you to presume that draft speaks to the final shape of the amendments is presumptuous. I think that, Mr. Speaker, that all of us will want to move rather quickly when we have the nursing home amendments in front of us, and I'm sure that the honourable gentleman will want to share with me, as a result of his having obtained already a copy of those amendments, which were in that form, would like to provide to me written submissions with respect to what his interests are on the various sections. And I welcome those, and I'm sure that we will have through committee, when the proper time comes, several people who will want to provide us with input to make the legislation very good for the interests of the residents of the nursing homes of the province.
Supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister's flexibility is somewhat enheartening, but on the other hand, I will say to him that perhaps he will have to access our documents by the same method that we access his. Subsection 2A and B of this draft bill sets out the role of the proposed nursing home residents representative, but I fail to see in any of these sections any mechanism whereby the residents representative can take a complaint on behalf of a resident and have it adjudicated and have that decision enforced. Can the Minister describe how, in his view, the proposed amendments to the Nursing Home Act would provide any mechanism that would respond to complaints lodged by the residents' representative?
Minister.
We have a number of ways already of those complaints being adjudicated, as you say. There is the inspection process. There are, in terms of opportunities, if there are more serious violations, the opportunity to access through the courts. You know that, and I can tell, Mr. Speaker, the people here that the reorganization of the nursing homes branch will provide us with a much quicker way of accessing the difficulties or getting access to the difficulties which cause the complaints to be lodged in the first place. I think that all of us would like to see an enhanced role for the Residents' Council and providing some building up of their opportunities of providing early resolution of the problems that may persist in the nursing home where the complaint originated.
Final supplementary.
Complete captive of his bureaucrats, Mr. Speaker. Would the Minister not agree that the time has now come to implement an Ontario-made Patients' Bill of Rights an independent office of patient advocate with adequate financial resources and an effective mechanism for enforcing the provisions of the Patient's Bill of Rights that is independent of the Ministry of Health.
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman would probably acknowledge that because this deals with the residents of nursing homes, that it cannot be fully independent in terms of a Bill of Rights from the Ministry of Health. I think that the rights, Bill of Rights or whatever that may be included in a later draft, perhaps, might very well be nothing but independent, because those rights go with the resident. And I can't see how the Bill of Rights can be tied to the Ministry of Health. But if you would provide me with your thoughts on that, I'll be pleased to consider them when the final draft is brought forward.
New question, the member for High Park, Swansea.
Mr. Speaker, I would have liked to address my question to the Minister responsible for women's issues or the Minister of Labour, but in their absence, I am now stuck by asking the question to the Minister responsible for government services. I would like to ask the Minister, how can he justify his government's concern about pay equity and sensitivity to women's issues and minority issues when right under his own nose, his own government refuses to apply even the principle of equal pay for equal work in its shameful exploitation of immigrant Portuguese women who are paid only $5 per hour to clean members' offices in the Whitney Block and the Frost Building, while the same staff at the main legislative building, cleaning the same offices, doing the same work, is paid $9.01 per hour. How can you justify this shameful exploitation?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I must say I know it is a stormy day, but to have my friend from High Park start his question by lamenting that he's stuck with me is not, for me at least, an encouraging sign.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, I am trying to respond to the question. If the member from High Park can contain his exuberant colleagues from Scarborough Centre in Cornwall, it perhaps will be easier. I want to say to the honourable member, I would like the opportunity to check very carefully the information that he has so dispassionately put before the Assembly. My experience with this kind of information is that it bears very careful scrutiny and examination. I will be very pleased to assure the honourable member that insofar as my understanding of the practices of the Ministry of Government Services are concerned, we are very fair. We apply the appropriate practices of the Ministry of Labour, the fair labour practice of the Ministry of Labour, but I will give the member an undertaking that I will receive his information and look very carefully to understand what precisely is going on.
Mr. Speaker, this is unbelievable that after 2 years the Minister will be saying he will be trying to find out or check on this issue. He knows very well that he is contracting out these jobs in a shameful way, where contracting out policy has become a means of social and economic injustice reminiscent of the 19th century sweatshops. And so stop posturing with your sanctimonious statements, and you explain me why half the salary...
Order. What was the question? Do you agree?
You 5 years ago when the nannies needed you.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, one could be provocative and say that given the practices of an administration in which the honourable member counted himself as a supporter, 1981 to 1985, that position from that member on that side is nothing short of breathtaking. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member is unhappy about the contracting out policy that his Conservative administration embraced with with an increased enthusiasm in the early years of the 1980s. I am sure that he made that point to his colleague, the now leader of the opposition, and the then treasurer, to say nothing of what he might have offered to his friend from Muskoka. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that we are in the ministry ensuring that we provide the fairest possible treatment, not just to our permanent complement, but also that those contracted out employees are employed in accordance with the fair labor practices of the Ontario Ministry of Labour. But I repeat to the honourable member, I will take his question and his speech as notice, and I will check it against the facts and report back to him.
Final supplementary.
Well, the Minister of Labour has just arrived, and maybe he could answer the question more fully. My final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, is the following. The Minister knows very well that having discovered the so-called $400 million in the minister's coffers, even when you contract out, you would think that when you have Bill 105 talking about pay equity, when you have a private member from Hamilton East trying to redress social injustice, they would find some money at least to give equal pay for equal work for these few women.
Is that your
Because
question?
I'll tell you, this bill will not redress it.
Order. I'm at a little loss. Are we talking about Bill 105? Was that a question?
Referred in my question that there is legislation before this House addressing the issue of pay equity.
Order. Minister, are you aware of that? Order. I could advise the member of the Times. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I just simply have to say to the member from High Park, Swansea, that I think that the best response that I could offer to his histrionics is the offer that I've already put, that this government has certainly ensured that those employees, I want to say to the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that those employees who are working within the government on a contracted-out basis are expected and are, in fact, working within the fair labour practices of the Ontario Ministry of Labour. I will repeat to the honourable member that I will take his submission this afternoon and review it very carefully and report back to him very shortly, because I wouldn't, Mr. Speaker, want to see the apoplexy of my good friend from West Toronto continue in this almost Christmas season.
New question. The member for York South.
I have a question for the Minister of Labour. In fact, I have several questions for the Minister of Labour. I'd like to ask the Minister, I'm sure he's aware of the testimony given today by Mrs. Larche, a 77-year-old widow from Timmins, whose husband died of lung cancer, was a gold miner for several decades in Timmins. I'd like to ask the Minister, given that there are literally hundreds of women and children who are in the same position as Mrs. Larche without any form of compensation whatsoever after their husbands have died of cancer. There are dozens of miners who are still alive with lung cancer who are receiving no compensation at the present time. The ministry has had studies for over a decade indicating the relationship between exposure to substances underground and cancer. Wonder if the minister can justify to this House the incredible delay in affording any compensation whatsoever to any of the survivors of miners who have died of cancer.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman would be aware there really are two issues. There's the issue of whether a causal relationship, an occupational relationship, has been established. And it's certainly my view, and I've sent that on to in presenting the second Mueller report, I think it was made clear that we had now reached a point in Dr. Mueller's findings where there was a relationship. The next question then becomes the criteria that ought to be established. Whether the criteria ought to be, whether, Mr. Speaker, the criteria ought to be that anyone who worked underground in gold mines or uranium mines or mixed ore mines at any time, for any length of time, and at any time over the last 50 years, ought to receive compensation for certain kinds of cancers, or whether there ought to be limitations, whether there ought to be standards. That's why the findings of Dr. Mueller have been sent on to the Industrial Disease Standards Panel, and that panel, which has representation from business, from labor, and from the scientific community, Mr. Speaker, that panel has set about trying to define what criteria, if any, and exactly what standards ought to be set. That's where this unfortunate widow, it's to that panel that she spoke last Friday, I believe, and certainly last week, and I look forward to hearing the kinds of findings that they'll come up with.
Supplementary.
He has time. Speaker, the minister will be aware that he has been in office for a year and a half. During that time, information has systematically been denied to the representatives of those widows and those survivors. Scientific information has systematically been denied them by his ministry. They have been denied access to reports which they have been promised literally months ago. The minister has failed to meet even the most modest request with respect to information and assistance. Given that incredible litany and the core fact that to date no one has been compensated, can the minister stand in his place and tell us why he shouldn't simply submit his resignation, since he clearly is not capable of doing his job in the province of Ontario?
Hey, right.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, the honourable gentleman, it was either the honourable gentleman or his colleague, my friend from Sudbury East, who in the spring of this year was on his feet demanding that the Mueller study, which was being peer-reviewed, that the peer review extend to a representative of the Steelworkers Union. This minister stood up and said, gladly we will do that, we will open up the peer review system. Now, Mr. Speaker, I understand, and I believe this is what my friend, the Honourable Leader of the Third Party, is referring to. I believe he's referring to an allegation, a letter I've received, and I just read it on my way up to question period, from Mr. Gerard, an allegation that the copies of the Mueller study, the original draft, the peer reviews, have not been made available to the Steelworkers Union. I wasn't able to get in touch with my officials to find out whether that's so or not, and if it isn't so, why it shouldn't be given. I believe it should. I believe it should be given, and I don't mind saying that. And I will communicate that with my officials on my return from question period.
Final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one can either conclude one of two things: that the minister is either utterly incompetent, or that the minister is intentionally denying information to people who are entitled to that information. Whichever of those is true, it's the view of our caucus that the minister should resign. The minister is simply not doing his job on behalf of the working people of this province, and we intend to show that today in the legislature. By way of final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the minister, given the fact that we have now in Ontario in 1986 2,000 accidents a day, the highest accident rate in the history of this province. We have a death every working day. This year, for the first year, a death every working day. Given that miserable record and your failure to enforce the law, your failure to do what needs to be done to make sure that employers are brought to heel, that we finally get some safety and health for the working people of this province, why don't you just submit your resignation and do the decent thing for once today?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to submit my resignation because I think that this minister, and certainly on behalf of this government, has done more in the first 17 months
this administration to enhance health and safety than was done in many, many years before. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, I must say that we on this side, Mr. Speaker, do not take a back seat to anyone on that side in the official opposition or in the third party in our care and our concern about working people in the province of Ontario. Mr. Speaker, I just came back from a luncheon speech to a group of electrical contractors in which I reminded them very forcefully of their obligations and reminded them that the lost time accident rate in this province remains unacceptably high. That's one reason that my colleague, the Treasurer, has given me an immediate increase in construction safety inspectors. The fact, Mr. Speaker, that we have...
Order. New question. Order. The member for Sudbury East. Order. New question. The member for York South.
Mr. Speaker, just so it's clearly on the record, the comments that are made by my friend from Sudbury East are worth repeating to the minister. There are fewer inspectors with you as Minister as Labour than there were in 1981. Let that fact stick with you and stick with you for a while. But let's move on to another area of your responsibility, the whole question of severance pay and the question of what happens to workers who are laid off and fired and victimized as a result of bankruptcy. The former clerk of this legislature retired and was asked to retire. The Premier stood in his place and said there was such a thing as normal commercial practice with respect to people who were laid off. That there was normal commercial practice for people to be paid with these high executive jobs a year, 2 years, 3 years. How does the minister feel about those tens of thousands of employees who are not covered by the 50 employee rule and who receive severance in the province of Ontario, a double goose egg? Nothing in the province of Ontario. Workers who've been there for 20, 30, and 40 years. You're a member of a cabinet that paid out $2 million in a compensation to one individual and tens of thousands of dollars to other senior civil servants. What about the ordinary working people? What are you doing for them?
The question's been asked.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would have thought that the honourable gentleman would have acknowledged to this House and to the people of Ontario that on Tuesday, or I guess it was Tuesday of this week, this legislature gave third reading to Bill 128. Bill 128 is the only piece of legislation that I know of in the whole country which seeks to undo the very regressive actions of the federal government, actions which will make a reduction to 1 in severance pay provisions useless. Reductions that deem that severance pay is deducted dollar for dollar from UI. And consequently, this government, as we prepare to move forward with new innovations and indeed with new standards on severance pay, felt it was first of all important that we become the first jurisdiction in Canada to ensure that severance pay will actually be paid workers where it's deemed appropriate.
Supplementary.
Speaker, what the minister is telling us is that he is proud of the achievement of the Liberal Party in bringing this province up to the level that it achieved in 1981, 82, 83 under Russ Ramsey as Minister of Labour. That's the record which he's standing on. Doesn't do anything for people who don't get any severance pay. But let's look at another area where you promised something and you simply haven't delivered. You've done absolutely nothing. You issued a report last year, November the 25th, 1985, a report which had only been delayed since June of 1983. Donald Brown, QC. Mr. Brown was appointed in June of 1983 as the sole commissioner to inquire into wage protection in insolvency situations. Mr. Brown recommends that actual wage arrears, vacation pay, and some benefits be protected by amendment to the Employment Standards Act. Labour Minister Rye noted. This is Labour Minister Rye last year, a year ago. My question is, what have you done in the last year for those workers who have been laid off and left out on the street without back wages because of bankruptcies? You've done absolutely nothing. Why don't you resign in the face of that fact alone?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think we can talk about a lot of individual circumstances within the Employment Standards Act, but I think it ought to be pointed out that that's exactly the problem. That the government has decided to move forward with a package of amendments, and when that package of amendments, which includes the first two instances that the honourable gentleman, the leader of the third party, has raised, when they're ready to go as part of a package of amendments to the Employment Standards Act, those amendments will be presented to the legislature. And I know at the time, Mr. Speaker, that those amendments are presented, that the leader of the third party, and indeed his colleagues, will be pleased with the progress that we have made in terms of severance pay, in terms of protecting workers in their pay in terms of bankruptcies. Will be pleased with the very progressive reforms that will put Ontario on the leading edge of employment standards anywhere in this country.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, by way of final supplementary, I want to ask the minister, can he explain the suppression of information, the failure to produce the Coopers and Lybrand report on health and safety, the suppression of information to those groups that want to represent workers that haven't had it, the failure to do the things you promised in doing in terms of protecting workers who are fired, protecting workers who are laid off, protecting workers who are the victims of bankruptcy. Can you possibly justify a year and a half in which none of those problems have been addressed, and at the same time, more people are being killed on the job today than on May the 2nd, 1985? More people are being injured today than on May the 2nd, 1985. Don't you think that those facts alone are sufficient for you to simply submit your resignation and let somebody do the job who really wants to speak for working people in this legislature?
Minister.
Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, I stand in my place and I say, look, at this province has moved forward with legislation which is the only, and we're the only jurisdiction to do so, to protect workers in terms of their severance pay. To protect workers, and the honourable leader of the third party stands up and says, that's nothing. Well, I want to tell you, my friend, it's more than the Premier of Manitoba has done for the working people of Manitoba. So let's not pretend that this province has done nothing. Let's not pretend that. Mr. Speaker, in a number of areas we are about ready to come forward with reforms and with new legislative achievements, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that's why perhaps we're getting some of these questions. In terms, Mr. Speaker, of the Coopers and Lybrand study, in terms of the McKenzie study, Mr. Speaker, Mr. McKenzie has about completed his study and it will be released in due course.
New question. Order. Order. The member for Carleton and Grenville would like to ask a question.
Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday I asked the Solicitor General a question regarding his use of OPP votes, and we haven't seen him since that time. Yesterday I asked the Attorney General a question, and now he's vanished. I'll ask the Treasurer, and perhaps he can give us some answers. This morning, Mr. Treasurer, we contacted the Ontario Provincial Police in Kingston, and they indicated to us that they would not forward the logs of the boat, the OPP boat, which was used by Mr. Keys this past summer. We then contacted Superintendent Jack Burke here in Toronto and asked him for those logs, and he referred us to the Solicitor General. Do you think, Mr. Treasurer, that it's fair that when the Solicitor General is under investigation by the Attorney General and by the Metropolitan Toronto Police, that we should have to go to him for information about his own activities?
I didn't call the honourable member the judge. I call him the executioner, you may remember. I want to respond to the honourable member by saying that he is correct. The matter is under investigation by the Metropolitan Police. I think comments from me dealing with the matter would be inappropriate at this time, but it seems to me that when that report is available, all that information will be a part of it.
Supplementary.
Mr. Treasurer, under your Premier's guidelines, conflict of interest guidelines, which he doesn't seem to have paid too much attention to before, they state that while holding an office, it will be the responsibility of the individual minister to ensure that whenever a matter involving a personal beneficial interest comes before the ministry, for which the minister is responsible, being a matter involving the discretion of the government, the minister will request that a colleague be officially appointed to act for the ministry concerned for the purpose of dealing with that matter. Will you, Mr. Treasurer, and Acting House Leader and Acting Premier, indicate who has been appointed to act on behalf of the Solicitor General, Mr. Keys, in this matter?
No one, Mr. Speaker. The Solicitor General continues to do his duties as is his proper responsibility. I would suggest to you that the review of the matter has been ordered by the Attorney General. It's being undertaken by the Metropolitan Police. And if anybody knows of any other circumstances that should be included in that investigation, I would expect that they would let the police or the Attorney General know about it.
New question. The member for Brantford.
The Minister of Labour, that fount of all generosity. Could the Minister of Labour tell me why, since February 20th last year, on March the 7th of this past year, on May the 13th, July the 18th, and this fall, I have attempted to obtain both in writing and by telephone and raising the matter in the House the number of convictions against corporations and workers in the province of Ontario. And despite 5 attempts, we have not been given that information. Can you tell me why we're not getting that information if you're doing so much for the workers of Ontario?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the honourable gentleman had asked for that statistic, and I believe the statistics, I don't have statistics for this year. I do have the 1985 conviction statistics, and as the honourable member asked this supplementary, I'll see if I can find the exact ones, but I believe that that what will be significant is not the 1985-86 statistics, but ultimately how those compare with 1986-87, since most of the earlier statistics were since earlier. And I remind my friend, the leader of the third party, since the new prosecution policy did not come into effect until November the 21st of 1985.
Supplementary?
The new prosecution policy isn't like the new information policy. You never get it. Supplementary, might I ask the Minister, since you talk so tough about your new prosecution policy and no more repeat orders. You said in this House in November of last fall there would be no more repeat orders, to be prosecutions. Can you tell me why, or why it is that your ministry has decided, under the 3 sections within your annual report, the number of repeat orders have been dropped? You used to be there with the Tories, and you've got away from it. You're certainly not going to show any repeat orders, because in fact what you've done is removed the statistic from your annual report that your minister is responsible for, not the fellows before you. And can you tell me why they're now writing information, writing suggestions, and writing new numbers so that they don't have to write or rewrite orders?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's that last part of the question is, with all due respect, a little vague. The first part refers to, and I'd have to check for my honourable friend, but we did state, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sure that, Mr. Speaker, he's accurate, but we did state that we were not going to be repeating orders, and we stated that in November. And I would have to check with those who put the statistics together, but I assume we put them together since we now only issue 1 order. There are no repeat orders, and the 1986-87 report, Mr. Speaker, annual report, will reflect that fact quite accurately. Now, if I can return to the first question, there were a total of 241 persons convicted at trial in fiscal 1985-86. The total number of counts was 305, since some persons were convicted on more than 1 charge. There were 157 employer owners convicted on a total of 199 counts, 56 supervisors on a total of 75 counts, and 28 workers on 31 counts.
New question? Order. New question, the member for Brampton.
Mr. Speaker, now that
Now that the snow is on the ground and we've had a summer with a number of rabid animals having been reported, I'd like to address a question to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Some of them are.
I'd like to ask him. Sounds like there's some rabid animals across the way. I'd like to ask him a question, Mr. Speaker, as to how successful the inoculation has been over this past season.
Order.
If he has those statistics and how effective it's been.
Minister?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Of course, it's a serious problem, and we have taken to dropping bait from aircraft. And we've had to increase the dosage. We've had to increase the dosage to be sure that it's effective. In Huron County, there's been quite a great deal of research going on in this particular matter, and of course, the results are going to be forthcoming. And when they come, I'll share them with the people on the other side.
New question. The member for Order. Order. The member for Cochrane South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Natural Resources, and it appears that the Globe and Mail gets more information than the members of this legislature are entitled to. The minister on October the 20th stated that he was distancing himself from the national position on softwood lumber. He also indicated that he would vigorously fight for Ontario's interests in the softwood lumber countervail in Washington. Since that time, we've had over 900 Ontarians lose their jobs because of the countervail. Can the minister indicate to me when Blake Castles was instructed to file a notice by this government, and secondly, when that notice was filed?
Minister?
Speaker, to talk to the questions in the order. The numbers that we're talking about in relation to jobs lost are numbers that I can't relate to. There are many industries that have said that this was a result of the countervail. There are others that said that it hasn't had any impact on the exports, and that remains to be seen. So I don't think the honourable member, in fact, has that kind of information that I could respond to, nor do I. The fact of the matter is that as relates to the Ontario government's position in this matter, ours has been one that's been unequivocal from day one. We have decided that we were going to fight the countervail. We're going to fight the countervail with everything we had at our disposal. And this honourable member has suggested that he participated in the countervail fight last time and they won. Well, the fact of the matter is that this member did not participate in any meaningful way. The fact is that a couple of ministers went down there and talked to the Commerce Department, but in reality, the fight was won because it was an entirely different playing field they were on. That there has been considerable change made, particularly by Sam Gibbons' bill that was introduced that's changed the whole world of subsidy as relates to the United States, and the new commitment by many politicians in the United States to go to a protectionist route has led to an entirely different forum, and he knows that full well, and that the Ontario position is a good one. The unions support it, the forestry ministers support it, and the federal government is leading the way in that particular manner.
Supplementary. The member for Cochrane.
Mr. Speaker, this minister has continued in the same vein as the Minister of Trade. You didn't even answer the question. You didn't answer the question. When orders don't come in for Ontario lumber, people are laid off. The orders aren't coming in for Ontario lumber, and 900 people in Northern Ontario are out of work. And will you confirm that only yesterday, in a letter dated yesterday and received yesterday by the Department of Commerce, the Washington law firm of Hogan and Hartson filed a notice on behalf of Ontario only yesterday?
Minister?
This notice that you're talking about is not to participate in the way that you're trying to define. This gives us information. This registration is only to get the information that's placed there and let us be a party to what's going on. But I have to tell you that the position of the Ontario government is to stand foursquare behind the federal government, and this is an international trade matter. You know that, and you're just trying to build this up into something other than it is, and that's not the case. The fact of the matter is that it's an international trade matter. There's more pressures than ever before on the Canada-U.S. relations on this matter. The federal government is leading in the fight on this countervail, and we are supporting them, and there's some differences with other provinces. That shall not happen with the province of Ontario. We're looking at protecting the workers here and many other natural resources because the Americans are threatening the sovereignty of Canadians to come over here and tell us how we should run this country, and we're not going to accept that.
Order. New question. Order. The minister, the member for Cochrane South, the member for Scarborough Centre. Order. 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 We'll just wait. The member for Cochrane South has already asked the question, a supplementary. Order. Order. Once again, I'll just wait. There are lots of members want to ask questions. The member for Bellwoods.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question, too, for the Minister of Labour with respect to his failure to reform the Workers' Compensation Board. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure most members of this Assembly have injured workers in their office every single week with 10 to 15% pensions from the Workers' Compensation Board because of the continued use of the meat chart approach to giving workers permanent pensions, and at the same time, these same workers are totally disabled and qualify for full benefits under the Canada Pension Disability Benefits. I want to ask the Minister, how can it possibly be, a year and a half after you took office, that you have failed utterly to reform the Workers' Compensation Board, that you are sitting on the Weiler Report, that you refuse to release the Weiler Report, and if you're not prepared to bring legislation into this House to reform the Workers' Compensation Board, why don't you step aside for somebody who will do that job?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would think, and I know that the honourable gentleman deals with a lot of injured workers in his riding and as the critic for his party, and I know he cares very passionately about the cause of injured workers. And I would think that the honourable member would want to ensure that when we move forward in terms of protections of injured workers and moving off the what he calls the meat chart, the permanent partial disabilities, that we do so the right way. The honourable gentleman, Mr. Speaker, will know that the proposal that was rejected in Ontario in 1983 is actually one which has been adopted in a number of other provinces in this country, and so we must move to something different. Professor Weiler has delivered a draft report. I indicated to the member in the House the other day, and I indicated to all members of the House, we are waiting for Professor Weiler to give us a brief update on one issue which he did not speak of in his report, and I felt that all members would want to see his views on that issue, and then we will table his report. With his report, Mr. Speaker, we'll be tabling some technical documents, some of which were not ready until early this fall, and that is the reason for part of the delay. But I want to get on with the reform just as soon as we have a proper reform to move to.
Supplementary.
You're a sick joke. On November the 6th, by way of supplementary, I asked the Minister of Labour to explain why the investigation, the internal investigation into allegations with respect to the Workers' Compensation Hospital in Downsview, which are an inquiry which is being conducted by the man against whom the allegations are made, the director of the Downsview Rehabilitation Center, why that report had not been released, even though the time for the inquiry was up. That was November the 6th. It is now November the 20th. My question is very simply, are you so afraid of the bureaucrats in the Workers' Compensation Board? Are you just as afraid of those bureaucrats as you are afraid of the bureaucrats in your own Ministry of Labour? And have they got you just as bamboozled as your own ministry officials?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm told, and I was speaking with the honourable gentleman privately, and he asked about the timetable on the report, and I'm told we're about 2 weeks away on the final report. They did take evidence from a number of witnesses. Transcripts were gathered of that evidence, and it took some while for the transcripts to arrive in Toronto after being transcribed by court stenographers in Windsor. Mr. Speaker, the charges I want to indicate to the House, in just correcting the honourable member, if I might, the charges are not against Dr. Kummel. The charges are, there are a variety of charges, Mr. Speaker, in terms of impropriety and misconduct. In terms of impropriety and misconduct at Down's view, and Mr. Speaker, I'm as concerned as any other honourable member, more concerned than others. I would have thought, Mr. Speaker, that the honourable gentleman might have, in the preamble to the question, or perhaps his friend from Hamilton East would have acknowledged the fact that a new regional office opened in Hamilton this week, that one will open in Thunder Bay next month, and another one in Ottawa next spring. This government...
Order. 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 I'm not recognizing the member for Sudbury East for a supplementary. Order. Order. The member for Yorkview. New question.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question of the Minister of Revenue. The Minister will be aware that on October the 29th, Metro Council passed a motion endorsing in principle the Section 63 market value reassessment for Metropolitan Toronto.
Order. Order. I appreciate the information from the member for Durham York. I had not recognized you for any comments. The member for Yorkview with a new question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it seems that the official opposition can provide us with some lessons as to what is class. But we'd be prepared after the session to listen. Mr. Speaker, I have a question of the Minister of Revenue.
I recognize the member for a question. Good.
Anyway, as I say again, the Minister is well aware that October the 29th, Metro Council endorsed a motion that Section 63 reassessment be applied in Metropolitan Toronto. The Minister will also know, and it is my understanding, that Metro Council has asked for a release of the Metro-wide reassessment study that was done in 1980. The motion that was passed by Metro Council also called for the province to deal with a number of other issues. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, what issues remain outstanding? How is the Minister prepared to handle the issues that Metro Council has put on the table? And specifically, is the Minister prepared to release the study that was done by the province in 1980?
Any answer to those questions?
I thank the honourable member for his question and recall to you, Mr. Speaker, those days that both of us remember when we had to give written notice to the cabinet ministers before 12 o'clock before any question could be asked. That was in the bad old Tory days. The honourable member who asked the question is correct, and he will recall that I tabled the letter from the Metro chairman indicating that the council does not require the specific lot-by-lot information based on 1980 impact studies. The letter, and it was tabled, the honourable members interested in it from the metropolitan area at least, would know that he specifically asks for an up-to-date impact study. And I have been asking the officials of the Ministry of Revenue about their capability in this regard, and they indicate that an impact study based on 1984 values will be undertaken early in the coming calendar year. It should be completed by the spring of '87, and I can assure the members that when it's completed, it will be put in the hands of the Metro chairman, so the impact may be assessed in the way that the chairman sees fit, along with the members of Metropolitan Council, so that they can move forward to a metro-wide reassessment. Since the honourable members are very anxious to know about the letter that the honourable member brought down to me, I had, in response to an earlier question, showed him my response to the tabled letter, and I now table both copies, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the Treasurer's response that a new impact study is going to be undertaken. But I asked the Treasurer, Mr. Speaker, to give an assurance to the House today that the same actions of the previous government is not going to be undertaken by our government, that once that study is completed in 1987, that not only will it be tabled with the Metro chairman, but that it will be tabled in this House for the information of all members of this Assembly.
My own view is that once it's completed, it should be put in the hands of the Metropolitan Council. Since it affects the assessment of properties in Metropolitan Toronto, I believe it should be left up to them as to whether it be made public or not.
New question, the member for Mississauga East.
I guess the title of that last question could be I Love You Truly. It was a real sweetheart question, and it was a sweetheart answer, too. Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Treasurer. This is a sweetheart question, too. Mr. Treasurer, members and employees of the Ontario trucking and truck manufacturing industries are gravely concerned about this government's intention to reintroduce the full 7% sales tax on trucks and trailers on January 1st, 1987. Representatives from these industries have made both written and oral presentations to the Minister on this matter since it was first proposed. Most recently, presentations were made at the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, which met last Thursday and again today. Will the Minister now agree to accommodate the very reasonable and workable recommendation of the trucking industry that the tax be phased in over 3 years?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Ontario is the only jurisdiction that has a sales tax that does not apply it to heavy trucks. The exemption came in 1982 under the leadership of the present member for Muskoka when he was treasurer, because of the substantial downturn in the economy was hitting the trucking industry very hard indeed. It is now our understanding that sufficient prosperity has returned to the economy in general, that the sales tax can be reimposed, and it would involve a revenue in the full year of about $65 million. It is my feeling that the provisions of the bill as it presently is should be maintained, but I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that we have had presentations in the committee, Financial Affairs and Budgetary Matters, or whatever it's called, from a number of trucking companies, as well as others concerned with the bill, and those matters will be considered by myself and the staff of the Ministry of Revenue before the bill is brought before the House. I've given an undertaking to the members of the committee that if there are any amendments, and frankly I expect that there will be, the members of the House will have plenty of notice before the bill is called.
Supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, supplementary. In a recent letter from the sales manager of one of this province's truck manufacturers, I was advised that, and I quote, a trucker would have to drive 23,000 additional miles and would have to work an extra 9.5 weeks to pay the tax. I was also advised by him that if this proposed full reimposition of sales tax goes ahead as planned, his firm will be forced to shut down for 3 months. Numerous others have relayed the same message to the Ontario Trucking Association and to me. Again, Mr. Speaker, I ask and urge the Treasurer to agree to phase this tax in over 3 years, as requested by the thousands of firms and individuals in Ontario's trucking industry. Will he give us that agreement, that commitment today?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for reasons that I've already referred to, the answer is no.
New question, the member for Hamilton East.
I have a question for the Minister of Labour. This morning I had the delightful experience of spending a half an hour with Mrs. Jean Larcher, the 77-year-old widow of a Timmins area gold miner, and who also lost 3 more of her family. Is that not important enough? Jackass from...
Order. Order.
I remark, which was certainly...
Yeah, I just wanted to make certain that it... Right.
Mr. Minister, Jean Larcher knows, and is the Minister aware that she knows, that as the head of a group herself of some 44 widows of miners who have died of cancer in Timmins, that without the peer review of the Mueller study, without the second phase of the Mueller study, and without the nominal roles of all of the workers from the board, they cannot establish any of the claims for the workers. Now, knowing that, can the Minister of Labour tell me, inasmuch as this information has not been made available despite requests for almost a year, can the Minister tell me what we should say to Mrs. Jean Larcher?
Minister? Well, I think Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member would want to get his facts right first. The fact of the matter is the peer reviews weren't completed until sometime this summer, so it hasn't been almost a year, and let's be clear on that in the first instance. Mr. Speaker, I've already made a commitment. Mr. Speaker, that I would speak to my officials on my return from the House today about ensuring that the draft, the final report, and the peer reviews of the Mueller study are made available to the representatives of this widow and others. That is the United Steelworkers Union, and I indicated I had a conversation with Mr. Gerard, the director of District 6, this morning, and he raised this matter with me. In my conversation with Mr. Gerard and in the letter which he hand-delivered to me, he also raised the issue of nominal rolls. I apologize, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member and to the House. I had a luncheon engagement to which I was speaking to a group on health and safety matters, and consequently, on my return from the House this afternoon, I will take that issue up with the board.
Supplementary.
Well, Mr. Minister, given that it took in the uranium mines as much as 3 to 5 years to establish some of the landmark cases, and we have not yet established one in the gold mines, and given that there are several hundred widows of gold miners who died as a result of exposure, which the Mueller report clearly indicates is the cause, can this minister tell us, and he knows this has been an ongoing fight for years, why nothing has happened to protect those women, why they have not got the pensions that are necessary, why they're living in the kind of poverty that was outlined by Mrs. Larcher, and why, with that kind of record, you sit as the Minister of Labour in this House? You should be ashamed of yourself and resign.
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the 7th time, and if there's one more question, there may be an 8th time. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how long it will take for this member and the members of the third party to understand. The Industrial Disease Standards Panel is now assessing the Mueller report, Mr. Speaker, to establish the criteria that are appropriate in terms of the granting of compensation. I think for the first time we have the opportunity to move off an unscientific finding to a scientific finding. Very often in these very difficult cases, the kind of progress that the honourable member wants and that I want takes some time, but I think that we ought to give the Industrial Disease Standards Panel the time to do it right. I think the members who support Labour on the Standards Panel, Mr. Gagnon, Ms. Jolly, and Dr. Chong, would want the time to do the job properly.
We'll just wait. The member for order. The member for Durham York, new question.
I have a question to the Treasurer. Farmers in your riding and mine today are delivering corn to elevators for about $2.16 a bushel. Subtracting from that drying charges of 25 to 30 cents, trucking charges of about 15 cents a bushel, and for some custom combining charges, many of these farmers are not getting back their out-of-pocket costs just for seed fertilizer and so on. How do you expect the farmers in our ridings to compete against the treasuries of USA and the European Economic Community?
Treasurer.
Mr. Speaker, I noticed in Farm and Country, which arrived on our kitchen table yesterday, that in fact the Canadian price for corn is a bit higher than the world price, indicating that the matter is at least as bad as the honourable member describes. He'll be aware, however, that the federal government has a stabilization program which returns to the farmers 95% of the average price of corn over the last 5 years, and that the province of Ontario has an additional program that adds 5% on top. As a matter of fact, that legislation was passed during the last minority legislature going back to 1975. This really means that there is some protection. It really means that the federal treasury and, frankly, to a lesser extent, the provincial treasury will be called upon to assist the farmers under those special circumstances. The federal government has as well placed a protective tariff on imports of corn from the United States, which we hope will have some effect to buoy the price up. The fact remains there is a surplus of corn on the world market, and because of the competition between the European Common Market and the United States, dealing with matters that the honourable member is very familiar with indeed, we are in a particularly difficult situation. It's expected the farmers will receive something between $3 and $3.15 a bushel if they are participants in the program. But in the long run, the situation continues to be difficult.
Supplementary.
Well, the current situation has been triggered by the passage of the U.S. Farm Security Act, as the Treasurer well knows. That act was brought into effect between your first and second budget. Your last budget, of course, gave the lowest percentage increase to agriculture in of any of the last three budgets here in the province of Ontario. How many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars do you intend to award to Ontario farmers to face this new crisis that has come into existence since between your first and second budget?
Treasurer. Mr. Speaker, I don't find the question unreasonable. The honourable member will know that there has been a substantial increase in the allocation to the agriculture budget in the province, and he will also know that the federal government has announced just about the time of the Saskatchewan election that an additional $1 billion would be allocated to the farmers across Canada. It is our hope that the federal government will participate in the improvements that are planned in our funding program for agriculture that I'm sure the Honourable Minister of Agriculture will be discussing in this House sometime in the next few weeks. He is with the Premier in Vancouver at the present time, but I know that he is deeply concerned about this, and he and his other colleagues in Cabinet are working on it.
Time for oral questions has expired.